Hey everyone, let's talk about the final project. So this document is a final project template. We're going to get you to fill it out according to your own project needs. There's some mandatory sections in it though that you're going to have in there, like use cases and the like, but you can vary the structure a certain amount. So on the first page, we have here the project name and your group members. Ideally, you're going to have a group of 3, but you may have 2 or 4 depending on how the class breaks down. There's a table of contents in the second page. Probably keep it there. If you modify the document at all, you can update it, right? And probably do that last before you hand it in, just to make sure it's consistent. The first substantive page is the introduction, and this talks about the document itself. And it may talk a little bit about your application and why you thought it was interesting, but it's mostly about the process of writing the document. So it's going to tell us who the group members are. If you went and you interviewed anyone, say at a law firm about e-discovery, say at a court about, I don't know, dispute resolution or some other type of topic, we'd like you to list them here, right? And it's a good way of crediting them, but also letting us see what sort of effort you put into this. And then one thing that's actually kind of interesting is that we'd love to have you, if you hold design sessions or the like, put in pictures of your meetings, notes, diagrams, and primary source material from your process here. So the introduction is really about the process of coming to your design. It's about describing what the design is to us. And the real description of the application itself is going to be on the following pages, right? You're going to have your use cases and interrelationship diagrams and the like. This is for you to talk about your methodology, who your group was, who you interviewed, and give us a little sample of some of your process for creating this. The next page is the background section. The background basically describes your problem. You should assume the reader doesn't know that much about it. So you have to present the information that you need to understand the problem. For access to justice issues, you could bring in material if you want, cite some papers, you could cite some studies. Basically do whatever you need to do to convey to the reader what the background of the problem is, right? And then there's 3 other sections here, at least 3. One being the social environment. So this is really important for any information system. We want to describe the stakeholders, the incentive structures, and other features of the problem. So if you recall the lectures that we had in class when I was there, these would be the things about the, say the court, the incentives of all the actors in the court, right? What exactly counts as justice? What regulatory structures are imposed upon the particular area that you're looking at? So for instance, if you're interested in direct-to-consumer legal services, then you'd have to be very concerned to describe some of the interests at play, including lawyers who might view you as a competitor, governing statutes that might prohibit the unauthorized practice of law and all the rest, right? So what you should do is you should identify the major stakeholders, and you should definitely put them in point form or in a table, right? So you explicitly label them and have a discussion of them. And that would include their goals and interests in the scenario, right? So in the case of access to justice, a litigant who's interested in family law would be interested in, obviously, being able to access either courts or a mediation mechanism or something like that with reasonable cost, with relative predictability and all the rest, right? So the more you sink into understanding your stakeholders, the better off you are. The technical environment is kind of interesting. It's a little less important for this, but it still is interesting, and you should spend some time on it. This would be the sort of underlying environment in which the application is to be deployed. If you're talking about an iPhone, for instance, obviously you're going to need an iPhone, like a store download to get the app onto someone's machine, but you may also need other things. In the case of a desktop application, you may need certain types of peripherals like a scanner, right? If you're going to do an OCR-based application. Okay. Privacy and security are always concerns, right? And so I'd like to have you think a little bit about that. And cloud computing also, if you're relying on a cloud environment, you might want to talk a little bit about what sort of service levels you're going to require, what sort of infrastructure the cloud has to have. Okay. So this sort of stuff isn't as important. It'll follow once you get your idea of what to do. For instance, Margaret Hagan and I are working on a court reporting project, and it's to help reduce recidivism and absenteeism in the California courts. And so what we need is we need a device to send messages to cell phones, right, for people who are registered as having court appointments. And there's a certain infrastructure required to do that, to bridge between a computer and a cell phone SMS message. So you don't need to describe it in detail. This is not like an architecture document, but you do want to at least lay out some of the basic fundamental required technologies here, right? And then anything else you need to do to talk about the background of the problem, right? You may need to think in more detail in one area or another. So the next page is on the project vision. This is really important. We talked about this a little bit in class. The vision is like an elevator pitch, right? It's your 3 or 4 sentences that outline the vision of the project. These are aspirational goals. So a vision statement might be, we're going to build the best operating system in the world. It might be something like, we're going to implement a system to reduce wait times in courts by 30 or 40% in British Columbia. It could be a whole bunch of things, right, depending on your application. So you can describe it in 3 or 4 sentences. You could take 1 or 2 if it's really short and pithy. And then also, you can document, as a side note, the process by which your group agreed upon this vision. And that would be sort of interesting for us, right? Because agreeing on a vision is actually not easy, right? Because everyone has different views of a problem. It can be really hard to get multi-stakeholder agreement in any circumstance. Okay. Next section is on the business case. So this is important because we'd like to know that you're actually proposing a solution to a problem that matters, right? And it's a solution that could be viable in some sense. If it's a private sector product, it could be, self-sustaining, could generate revenue or all the rest. So those of you with a business background, this is your chance to let loose and think about what problem you're trying to solve, how important is it, how useful is technology as a means of solving it, and is there a good rationale for using technology rather than another sort of approach, right? And if you really want to, you can do your return on investment analysis and all that other nice stuff like cost benefits and all the things that you put into a small business case. Don't go to town so much on the business case in terms of accounting, trying to figure out how much this thing would actually cost. I'm more interested in the argument that technology is a good solution to the problem, right, at a high level. Next page, this is where it gets fun for those of you who are visuals. So this is storyboarding. We talked a little bit about this in class. This is just a storyboard that I stole off the web, right? So basically a storyboard is a graphical representation of someone going through and encountering your application, right? And it can show them in their course of life. So here we have someone who's walking down a hallway and they're going into a room and all the rest. And it's very much like a movie. So this probably was taken from a screenplay, right? Here's a little gun and all the rest. But I put this in here to show you that a storyboard can show dramatic action, right? Like it can show the people behind the application. It's not just a wireframe, which is a picture of the user interface. You can actually go to town on this. And you don't need to draw well. Like this person is not doing anything sophisticated in terms of drawing. There's a lot of stick figures here. Here's another one. This is one of Margaret Hagan's. And I believe this is from our SMS court messaging app. So we have here someone coming in, handing over a document to another person. This is the user, I believe, here in colored. And they sign up for this reminder program. And the information is entered in. And so, you get a hint of a user interface here, right? Margaret's sort of hand-drawn this. But by and large, this is the story of the people using this application, right, in very simple form. And unfortunately, I think it cut off. There's another row there. So it shows the context in which the application is used, not just screenshots. Okay, so just go back to this. Do as many storyboards as you need. It's kind of fun, so you'll sit down, you'll be able to do these for a few hours and really get into it. You can do it by hand, you can use computers or whatever you like. It doesn't really matter, as long as it conveys some sort of narrative behind, the narrative explaining the rationale of the use of your application. Next, system context. So we talked about this in class as well, and the idea of the system context is to show the environment and then to show what the system consists of, right? And I have a bunch of examples here that we'll go through. This is an example taken from, I think it was Hamilton Health Sciences in one of the documents I did for them. So there are a whole bunch of participants. These are other health centers, right, in their network. And Cancer Care Ontario, Canadian Canadian Institute for Health Information, physicians and researchers here on the outside. And the idea is to show that this system under consideration, which was called Mosaic, actually sits at the center of a bunch of data interchanges between these various entities, right? So it's right here. Information goes out to Cancer Care Ontario and the Canadian Institute for Health Information and physicians and researchers, but it doesn't come back in from them. So it shows a little bit of the context of what the system is and what the system isn't, right? Never mind what the acronyms are, it doesn't really matter. The idea is that this is the system in this little boundary, the system boundary, and all these things on the outside are not part of the system, but interact with it, okay? So let's go to another one. This is also from a professional project. So this appeared in some document that no one likely read. And this shows a system here, two systems actually, that are in use by the Ontario Telemedicine Network. And they're sitting here and they're being used by a bunch of member sites. These would be clinics, hospitals and the like, central scheduler, another member site. And so to schedule teleconferencing, the member sites have to communicate with the central system here. And there's another bunch of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. The Ministry of Health is involved at some point, and there's some network infrastructure. But this shows you what the system itself is, right? And so this defines the scope. If you have this in a document, you could say that you're going to concentrate just on these elements and you're going to leave all the rest out when you're defining your system. But they're part of the environment that the system operates in, okay? And here's another one taken from the web. It's not one of mine. I think I found this just in an image search, right? But it's a good example of another form of system context diagram. It's very simple, right? Just a circle and a bunch of rectangles. And here's a book order system. And so this would be the system. There's no system boundary in this diagram. It's just a circle. And the external entities are up here in rectangles. So you have management, customers, printers, accounting, and they sort of interact with things like this, okay? So here's the flows of information. You'll notice that they're not labeled here, and they're not labeled above here either. But the person who wrote this system context diagram did label them here, right? And this may help you, it may not. So there are three examples of system context diagrams. You know, you can also Google these things, but the idea is kind of show the environment, show the actors, right, like the customers and management, accounting, and printers that are interacting with this system, and some of the basic flows, right? So it's an overview. It's intended for you to get a sense of what the system includes and what it doesn't, right? Okay. Use cases. So your final project has to include a set of use cases. We discussed this in class as well. So a use case is an interaction with the system in which an actor, and that could be a human being, it could be a legacy system or another information system. It fulfills some goal by means of the functionality that the system provides, right? So if I'm going to an ATM machine and I want to get cash out, one of the use cases is to withdraw cash, right? And as the actor, I want to be able to go up, use my credit card and get cash from it. It'd be great if it gave me cash without, the ATM card, but it's probably not going to happen. So the main use case there is I want to get cash from the ATM. I can also deposit to it, so that's another use case, right? And then I might be able to check my balance. I might be able to make bill payments through it. So there's a bunch of use cases that an ATM has. And there's maintenance use cases too, where a maintenance worker might come up and have to add more money, right? Because it's been depleted of money, or may have to, maintain the machine or check the security or the like. And so those would be maintenance use cases, right? So to get started on this, you're going to have to identify all the actors that are involved in your application, okay? So you typically start with the stakeholders you identified above in your description, but you have to consider other information systems too. So our court messaging system that Margaret and I are working on, it has to interface with the court's own court record system, right? So that's a legacy system that's already in place, and they have to coordinate somehow, all right? In our Pete's example that we talked about before, right, so the actors included a customer, manager, and driver, right? But we also had someone point out that there's a payment processor lurking behind the scenes, okay? And here's a quick example of arranging actors in a hierarchy. So, oops, don't know what's happening there. So basically, I have this notion of an employee, and employees are specialized into type. You've got managers, service desk personnel, and IT staff, and then IT staff can consist of administrators and developers, right? And the idea is that someone down here, like the system administrator, has all the capabilities of the person above, right? But they're specialized in some way. They may have extra capabilities. So here, an administrator is a generic role. All of these people are administrators. But the system administrator might have access to like the operating system. The database administrator might have access to the database, right? So they have additional privileges, and they're not the same as each other, but they all have the same privileges as an administrator. And they all have the same privileges as an IT staff member, and the same privileges as an employee. So they all get a paycheck, they all have a login username, they can all access the data center, for instance, right? The manager is an employee, but doesn't really have any of the capabilities of the IT staff. So this is optional. You can do it if you want to. It helps to outline your actors. In a case like the pizza website, there's no point. With more sophisticated environments like this one in healthcare, you'd actually have to do this, right? But for this document, you can treat this as optional. I suggest you do it just for practice. And here's a little description down here. Now, the important point is that when you've identified an actor, right, like the driver in the pizza case, you sort of have to provide a little documentation form. What do they want from the system and all the rest. So you might note down that the driver basically wants to make sure the order gets to the customer, they get paid that way, and then they get a tip or something like that, right? So we'll go through a couple sample use case diagrams. Remember, we talked about them in class. This should be a refresher. So here's the sample I pulled from the web. It's not one of mine either. This is for, oddly enough, a food management system at a restaurant, right? And so order management. And we have a waiter, we have a client, we have a cashier, and we have a chef. And those are the four actors in our scenario. There's no other information systems present. And each fundamental use case, remember, each use case is an interaction that allows an actor to get value from the system using its functionality, is outlined in a little oval, right? And you can use Visio, you could use Lucidchart or any other diagramming program you want for this. So here, one of the primary use cases is obviously to take an order, right? So the waiter receives an order that's placed by the client. So they're both involved in this use case, and there's a nice line between them. Okay. Only the waiter can serve food. The waiter and the client and the cashier are involved in paying for the food, so they all take part in that interaction as well, right? This is interesting. So we didn't talk about this in class, but it's in here in the diagram. I might as well comment on that. As part of ordering food, you may order wine. Okay, so this is like an optional extension of this use case, and so it's denoted by the extend annotation here. Same here, if you serve food, you could optionally serve wine. If you eat food, you can optionally drink wine. I don't know why this is here. Actually, this isn't really a system feature. This is kind of what the customer does, so this diagram is not very good. And pay for food and paying for wine, right? So this gives you a sense of how you could take the basic use cases and add optional use cases onto them. So if I order food, I may also order wine. In other words, order wine extends this use case, right? We'll see another one below. And that's right here. So the extends label means that one use case is an optional extension of another, right? Now for each use case, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to actually document it, right? So for each one of these things up here, like order food, you'd have to have a little table. And this would say order food, the primary actor, the goal, right? What does the actor want from the interaction? Brief description of it in natural language. Preconditions, what has to be true in order for this use case to begin. So in the pizza website, we might require that the user has to log in first, right? So they have to log into the pizza website, and then they can order their pizza. They can put it together and pay with their credit card. Someone in class pointed out that Uber requires the user to download the app and register, right? So you might not be able to use the app until you're registered. So that's a precondition of the order ride case in Uber. Post conditions, what happens when the use case completes, right? This is basically, I don't know, what you'd expect from successful completion of this interaction. So for a pizza website, if I order a pizza as a customer, I expect that the order has been placed and the kitchen's going to work on it, right? And then the basic flow, this is for the pizza website again. You select crust type, you select a cheese type, you select a topping type, and then you click next, right? So it's very simple, but you do need to specify the basic flow. Now, if there's alternative flows, you should specify them down here too. So there may be exceptions or errors. If the user selects a cheese type that is not in stock, for instance, maybe there'll be a little window that comes up and gives them a warning, right? So it doesn't take too long, but you have to think fairly carefully about this. So let's see another one. This actually is a pizza delivery case. I think I whipped this up after class very quickly. So we have a customer, manager, driver, and payment processor, right? And these are what I chose for use cases for this. So you register on the website. Once you've registered, you can place an order. As part of placing an order, you order a pizza, right? And then you submit a payment. And so the annotation this time is not extends like it is here. It's called uses. And the idea is that when something uses another, it's like a sub-component of it, right? So in placing an order, I always create a pizza as another use case, and I always pay for it. And if I don't have these two things, I haven't placed the order successfully, right? And here again, I could, if I wanted to, order drinks. So this is an optional case, and that's why we use extends, right? And down here, I just covered this again, the difference between these two. I can cancel my order. I can submit my payments. If I submit my payment, I have to go through the process payment use case, right? So if I submit my payment by credit card, before the pizza order gets authorized, the payment processor is going to take a look at it and say, okay, can I process this guy's credit card? If it fails, it may bounce me and say, you didn't pay for your pizza, right? So you have to think about these things a little bit. And here's just an example of one of these things. This is a place order use case written out for you, so you can see the sort of steps that are involved. Right. Here's another use case diagram. This is, once again, from a healthcare project. Schedule events, undertake training, grant access to the system, maintain the software, and manage user accounts. So this is actually how they're done in practice, right? Like this is from a professional document. I think this is a draft version because there's a little bit of an error here. But they actually do look like this, right? And you would cache them out this way. Okay. Data flow diagrams, they're optional. You don't have to do them for this project. You might find they're really handy in some circumstances, right? And here's an example of one as well. Here's a consulting specialist sending things to a central scheduler. And we have a little data flow here in red. It's annotated with a 5. And down here somewhere, I guess it's not on here, you're going to have to describe what's in this data flow, right? So if you have questions about this, you can ask me. You may not need these things. They're optional. Use them if you want to. You use a data flow diagram when you want to show the flow of information through a system, right? I suspect that many of you won't find it to be particularly useful for this project, but I just want you to know about them, right? And then you can ask me further questions if you find that they could be a useful tool for you. Likewise, business process diagrams are really, really useful. They're used everywhere in industry, right? So here we have a customer who's placing an order. This is not mine. I found this on the web again. And then the order is conveyed to a store where the sales department processes it, sends it over to delivery. They're supposed to deliver the goods, and here's a choice node, right, a decision point. If the goods are not delivered, then the sales department has to issue a refund, and it ends. If they are delivered, and then there's a receipt issued and a complete order in parallel, and then it ends, right? So really simple business flow. Law firms actually are starting to do this sort of thing all over. They're starting to map out process diagrams and to refine their processes. So if you're doing something that's really like interaction heavy, right, where you've got a lot of different things going on in your application, you may wish to use a business process diagram. If you do, there's a tool called, or a language called BPMN. It's called Business Process Modeling Notation. And it's a standard language. A lot of the tools like Lucid Charts that you can get freely online will support this, right? But it's optional. Once again, if I just want you to know about it. If it's useful to you, you can use it. It's also a hyper valuable skill and practice to learn. I'd say it's as useful as project management, really useful. Okay, wireframes. We talked about these in class as well. These are mock-ups of your user interface, right? They're not storyboards. They don't show the surrounding context. They just show the software. Here's an example I got from the web. This is not mine. Main navigation bar, secondary navigation bar. This is a website obviously. Breadcrumbs for topics, article info, advertisements, and all the rest. So this looks like it's for a blog, right? Like WordPress or something. Here's Margaret's for the court messaging system we're doing. She hand draws a lot of stuff, right? So this is her style. It's kind of awkward and there's no straight lines. She could use a ruler if she wants to, but it's just not her style, right? It's supposed to be kind of folksy and cartoonish. But it's still effective, right? Like you can get a sense. You enter in here, you have a whole bunch of things to fill out, and then you have a dashboard, and then you have confirmation, and here's your little app on your phone that does certain things, right? So this gives you a sense of what the interface could look like for this system. And here's her using a computer to do the same thing. So, you have intake, scheduling things, searching for entries, and all the rest. Okay. A lot of the tools that you find freely online, like Lucidchart, have libraries for user interfaces. So this was like, I don't know, 10 seconds to use Lucidchart's Android shapes, right, to mock up an Android interface. It doesn't take long to do this. So you could very easily go to Lucidchart, so if you're doing an iPhone app or something, and mock an interface out really, really, really quickly. They also have user interface widgets for like a generic information system that's not a phone, right? And so Monica mentioned that they've been using Mockingbird. I haven't tried that, but you might want to try it out too. So wireframes actually are mandatory for your project. You do have to do them, okay? Entity relationship diagrams, we talked about those in class 2. These show the data that your application is going to store. And basically we're doing things at a very high level of abstraction. So just to reintroduce things, entities are in rectangles, right? Relationships are diamonds between them or straight lines. I don't care which you use. And then attributes are going to be in ovals here. And so an entity is something that you're tracking as sort of a first-class object. So if we're running a library information system, right, we definitely want to have a book as an entity, right, because they're important things we're tracking. And we may wish to have a patron as an entity because they take out books, right? And maybe we have a few other entities, but those two are fundamental. And for a book, an attribute of a book could be something that's really important about the book that we want to capture in data. So its ISBN number, right, would be really important information, and its title would be really important information. And its filing number in the filing system would be very important information. About customers, you want to have like their library ID number. You'd have their name and address and all the rest. So you can contact them if they're late. You may have a list of penalties or fines that they have to pay, right, if they have a financial account. So we'll get to another example in a second. This is a very generic looking entity relationship diagram. So we have our entities, we have a relationship, and there's basically 3 entities. You go down and you give a brief description of each of the entities in a table, right? So we'll take a look at this one. I cooked this one up. I think it was using Lucidchart, nothing fancy. So this is our pizza order system again, and this is a small section of what we did in class. So our pizza website wants to store a customer as an entity because customers make orders. They're pretty important. We want to track orders. Obviously, if we're doing an order management system, we need to track orders. And here's where we had sort of differences in class, right? So here I've got a pizza order. I should have called it pizza. But a pizza order is like a configuration of a pizza that a customer has ordered. The important thing here, to mention this again, say customer is an important entity. We want to track name, email, address, and phone for a customer, and her past orders, for instance, right? We may wish to see if this customer's ordered from us before and what they have, right? We may wish to give them a discount or give them a coupon or something. About an order, a date and a time. An order can contain many drinks. So the double ellipse here, sorry, the double oval indicates that something is multiple. So you can have more than one of these, right? You can only have one date or one time in an order. You can only have one name, one email for a customer, but you can have multiple past orders for a customer, and you can have multiple drinks on an order, right? And these two are related, right? So a customer, and we read this across, a customer can be associated with 0 or arbitrarily many, that's the star, orders, right? An order can be associated with one customer and always one customer, right? So there can't be an orphaned order. There can't be an order that was placed by no customer. There has to be a customer for each order. Similarly here, an order can be associated with one or more pizzas. So if there's no pizzas, we don't have an order. If there's multiple pizzas, that's fine. Each configuration of pizza is, each pizza individually is associated with one order. So we can't share a pizza between two orders, right? So these are called multiplicities. You can define them in different ways. You can go look up how to do it. But they basically set the mapping between two entities across a relationship. So if we didn't have them, we wouldn't know if a customer could only have one order, could have multiple orders, or the rest. And we wouldn't know if a pizza could be associated with one order or more, or an order could have more than one pizza, right? So you put these things in to sort of limit the mapping between the entities. If you don't have these, it's it's a little harder to interpret. If you find it really confusing, just come talk to me, right? And show me your work in progress, and we can work through it. And here's an example. I've just sort of detailed the entity. So if we go back up here, right, this entity is an order. And in the table, I say, okay, this represents an order of pizza plus drinks. And I describe the attributes, right? So you want to describe everything in addition to modeling it visually. Okay. Requirements. So we're going to do functional requirements as we discussed in class. Non-functional requirements are things like hardware requirements and privacy and security and all the rest of that. We're not going to do any of that stuff. It's not important. And here's an example of the pizza website login screen requirement, right? So they're usually numbered just like in a statute. Number 1, login screen. 1.1, the system shall have a login screen, and all the rest. 1.1.1, the login screen shall have a greeting that shows the name of the system, text entry field, and then I'm going to say it's going to be 24 characters wide, and I can specify this in more detail if I wanted to. Password text entry field for the password, and it's only going to display star characters as a security measure, right? And so this is going to be very extensive for your system, right? We'd like to see some good requirements. Don't kill yourself doing things for 50 hours trying to document everything in the system. But as you talk to us, as you start to figure out what your application is, I'll give you a sense of what I want to see in terms of requirements. So it'll be a back and forth thing. You're not just on your own, and you'll have some guidance as you go through this. Project management section, this is super important because I think in addition to a few other key skills, this is one of the most important ones for law firms right now because they're all using project management pretty much in big firms. So what we're going to do is we're going to detail the basic steps required to develop and deploy your application. And so we want to see a work breakdown structure as well as a Gantt chart, all right? And we discussed these in class too. A work breakdown structure is a hierarchical decomposition of tasks. And a Gantt chart shows them in time, right? And you may have estimates for when you're going to complete, and you may have dependencies here, right? And these are what these little arrows are between them. So for this, Microsoft Project is the industry standard, but there's other free programs out there that allow you to do Gantt charts. You could also do them by hand if you really wanted to, right? Your pitch. Darren added this one. These are key selling points you plan to focus on when you're pitching your idea. This may be better off served in the business case above, right? So we may modify the template to put this above in the business case. The idea is that you're going to create some slides, and then you're going to have a description. And each slide should have a title. It should show the pitch you'd make to an interested audience. We're going to have a presentation on these in class. So this is what you're going to use to sell your idea to your classmates and to third parties who are going to be there, right? Think of it as good practice for presentation of any sort, but in particular, you're trying to convince people that your project is maybe good for funding, or they should take a chance on buying it or something, right? So this is where the salesmanship and marketing come in. And then Monica added this one. This would be regulatory hurdles, right? What issues are existing in your space? In particular, what regulatory burdens might you have to overcome? So we talked earlier about online direct-to-client legal services. There are know your client rules that lawyers have to obey. There's rules about the unauthorized practice of law and all the rest of that, right? So if you're doing one of those things like Rocket Lawyer 2, you're going to have to discuss those, right? If you're using the cloud really heavily, then you may have to actually look at if the Law Society, for instance, has rules regarding the use of cloud computing by lawyers and the rest of that. Okay. So that's it. That is the final project template. It takes a while to go through. So before you panic, remember you are working in groups, right? This is not something that has to be done solo. You're not going to be on your own as you go through this. We would like you to use Google Docs, for instance, and share the live link with us so we can see your document in progress as you progress. It also saves time for us because we don't have to email around Microsoft Word files, which I really hate. A lot of very top-level academics tend to do that, especially if they're 40 plus. They love emailing around Word files, and then it's a pain to find the correct version. So we'd like to see you use Google Docs because it's a pretty accessible tool, and we can share it amongst the professors in your group, right? So you're going to go through and you're going to fill out a whole bunch of this stuff, and it's not going to look like this in the long run. But I think between the classroom lectures and the explanations that I have in the text and you being able to go and Google things, right, and look at Wikipedia, you should be able to come up with a number of very good use cases and a number of very good diagrams and all the rest. So it's your chance to be creative and do something different, and also to build some fundamental skills, because a lot of this stuff like process modeling, use cases, whatnot, they are used in law firms. There's no doubt they're used in law firms. They're used in law firms in increasing amounts, right? Every single law firm that I know that's of decent size is starting to do process modeling, right? All the top 16 in the American top 100 by a volume of sales are doing process modeling, right? So the more you know about this stuff, the better off you are, right? So it is a good idea to struggle through it. And even if you don't know what you're doing at first, ask questions, go to Wikipedia, find examples on the web, and you'll be able to figure out what you're doing. And we'll give you guidance too, right? So you're not on your own. The part that you are on your own for is finding out an interesting application, right? Like coming up with the idea and coming up with the business case and trying to figure out the stakeholders and all that. Like that is your own work. When it comes to the diagrams and the modeling and the Gantt chart and all the rest, we're here to help you with that because we know it's something that's new to you. But we would like you to charge ahead, find a project team first, and then try and find an application that you can all kind of get excited about and begin to work on. All right, so that's it. Feel free to ask us any questions. We're here if you need us. And I think the university is on strike this upcoming week. So I would take the time to meet up with your project partners, find project partners if you don't have any, and start to really think about what application you want to do. So this final project basically is going to be the determinant of the mark in the course, right? So it is fairly important. And I think it's about time to start working on it because it's the beginning of March. And you have some weeks to work on it. I think they'll go by very quickly towards the end of the term. So the sooner you get started on it, the better. All right, thanks very much, and we'll talk to you soon.